Oi, oi. Welcome to a diary of a HR man. Diary of a HR man is brought to you by me, Omar Rashid, aka HR man, where I open up my HR diary of over 15 years experience. The purpose? For SME business owners to resonate, reflect, learn, and get guidance on their HR and people problems. So sit back, relax, and let's get right to it.
The HR man.
We meet new people nearly every single day, and some of these may just be one-off interactions, some may be the start of a potential ongoing relationship. These relationships may lead to friendship, acquaintances, love, and even marriage. In a way, to accelerate these relationships and to get them to a stage where, we get to know, like, and trust the other person, one element, in my opinion, is key. And it's not generally being kind, caring, supportive. Of course, these are key. But what I'm talking about is a different element that when you look back, you're like, yep, me and this person get on really well. They're funny, we have a proper laugh. And what this is generally built on banter. Now think about it. In your daily conversations with family, friends, work colleagues, even strangers, how much involves banter and jokes? Look at modern day communication methods, social media, WhatsApp, use of GIFs and memes. We have a lot of interactions with people via banter in one shape or form. Now, banter in the workplace is so much more prevalent. We most likely interact with people at work more than we do with family and friends over the course of the week. And we want to get to know our colleagues and have an environment that we really enjoy coming into work. Now, with COVID, we still interact, whether it's over Zoom or Microsoft Teams, WhatsApp, and even platforms like Slack. Now, working in HR, and I include recruitment, payroll, learning and development teams. In my experience, it was mainly dominated by women. And I would say women of a mature nature. So a work colleague once said to me, Omar, if you weren't in HR, would you have been a taxi driver? Now, I'm not going to tell you I raised a grievance for discrimination or I kicked off or anything like that. What I'm going to tell you is that I actually burst out laughing because I actually found it hilarious. And the reason why, it was the context it was said in. I'd built such a strong bond and relationship with this work colleague that it became the norm. That the things that we would say to each other, she was a mature work colleague and I would have banter with her regarding her age, even her weight. And you know what? She would dish it back. Looking back, some of the things we each said to each other was, well, very offensive. I mean, for example, look, being a Muslim, I had the whole terrorist jibes labelled at me, but it wasn't, always necessarily offensive or racial. We had banter about sports, the things we said, our accents, words that we even incorrectly pronounced, some of the actions that we did, we just had banter all round. I once received a phone call from a applicant waiting on an update on their recruitment, and they rang and they'd forgotten which one of my colleagues that they'd spoken with. So when I asked them, I go, look, who did you speak with? They said it was a woman. And I replied, well, you know what, they're all women in the recruitment team. Is there any chance you could be a bit more specific in any way? And they said that, okay, it was an elderly lady. And I chuckled and I said, well, they're all elderly, but I'm not sure if they're ladies. And the applicant themselves laughed, and the office hearing me saying this, they were in laughter as well, they were in hysterics as well. And you know what? Banter can bring, work colleagues, teams, departments, and the whole business, really together and build a very strong bond. However, banter can also create the opposite. It can isolate, it can discriminate, and it can have a real negative impact on a person and even a department. If, say, a manager is, kind of being really, really inappropriate and it gets out of control and it's not monitored. There is a very fine line between banter and bullying, and whether that is intentional or not, everyone's thresholds to banter are different, and this is where things can get tricky. We had a young temp working in our team, and after a while, one of the other members of the team noticed that they were a bit slow in completing certain work and tasks that they were given. They would make jokes around this, and it once peaked when it was said to the temp that, look, you should work in a morgue because the people there are dead and they're not going anywhere. So you can take all the time you want doing your work. Now, the temp approached me and shared their dissatisfaction to these comments and said that, look, it bothered him and he was upset by it. And you know what? The temp was generally quiet by nature and a bit reserved, so I felt lucky that they raised it, and by raising it I was able to nip it in the bud. I had an informal chat with the team, reminded them to kind of be mindful, to tone it down. I also checked on my own behaviors as well, and in this instance the temp could have just stayed quiet, knowing that the banter between the rest of us is quite strong, and he didn't want to, as they say, upset the apple cart, become a Scrooge, put a dampener on things. But, thankfully they didn't. And, some people will feel reluctant to raise any issues because of these reasons. Sometimes banter can spiral out of control. Now, there's two work colleagues in a small office environment, and they became very good friends, and the banter was constant. And the male colleague was single, and the female colleague was a lesbian, and they had banter in the office where the female would say to the male colleague, look, are you sure you're not gay? Because you can't seem to get a woman. And the male colleague would respond with comments like, well, can I come and watch you and your girlfriend then? You kind of get the gist of, the sort of tone and the levels of the banter that was happening here. But one day the male colleague found out that, his female colleague had broken up with her partner. He then started flirting and started sending messages and making comments relating to her being with him, coming to the other side. And on one occasion, the male colleague even touched her by buttoning one of her buttons on her blouse, unwanted, no consent or anything like that. And he was just stating that, look, you're revealing a little bit too much and I can't concentrate in the office. It was at this stage where the female colleague then said to him, look, this is just getting too much, and wanted him to stop. However, he carried on. And outside of working hours, he would constantly message her. It got to a stage where she even had to message him to say, look, I'm now blocking you. And at work, the male colleague then started getting a bit more stern with her, basically saying, look, you need to chill out, you need to relax, you need to learn that, how to take a joke. And the female colleague kind of raised it with the business owner, who then said that, okay, look, I'll have a word with this colleague. However, he made the point to say to her that, look, I've seen you joke around with him as well, so you can't have it both ways. A few weeks passed by, and the relationship between the two colleagues, became frosty, to say the least. The male colleague just couldn't understand why she took offence. The female colleague was upset that he did not respect that, his behaviour was crossing the line, and that, the jokes and the banter now wasn't that, and it was making her feel uncomfortable. And she was also upset that the business owner didn't recognise this. The female colleague eventually secured a new role and handed in a resignation and left. And the male colleague and the owner, the feeling that they had was that, okay, great, she's gone, because all she seemed to do was just kind of create an unnatural environment and atmosphere. For me personally, I think they got away with this very, very lightly. So when it comes to banter, there are a few things that an employment tribunal will consider. What was the culture and the environment like in the workplace? So take the first example. The chances of me or my work colleague bringing a claim for discrimination would be low, because we both went for it blow for blow. And that was the general atmosphere. The fact is that the comments were not unwanted. And, an employment tribunal will also look at the impact of the words and actions. The comments and words, that we said did not cause, and they didn't intend to cause any intimidating atmosphere or environment, and none of us were offended. The latter example of the female colleague is not so simple. Whilst they initially went toe to toe, she then ended up raising concerns that things were getting too much, and that the comments and actions therefore became unwanted, and it caused an intimidating and hostile environment. She also became offended with her colleagues' behaviour and actions. And then the fact that the business owner effectively brushed it under the carpet, made her feel at fault, did not help as well. So what can you as a business owner do to avoid the worst case scenarios? Well, firstly, the utmost basics. Have your policies and procedures in place, statements around inclusivity, fairness, treating everyone with respect and dignity. Maybe have annual training on bullying and harassment so that your staff are aware of, how potential words and actions that once, they cross a certain line, how that would have an impact on your colleagues. Now, the more important bits, having policies and procedures in place, it's great. It's a tick box even. But the reality is your staff are not going to be reading them on a regular basis, if not even at all. And that message is then not going to be really embedded. So for you as a business owner, make sure you've got regular communication. Reminders at team meetings are key. It keeps that message at the back of their minds. And also for me, look, you as the business owner, you need to lead by example. Now, I'm not saying you become a robot. Staff want you to be human as well. And the biggest thing is that you don't want to push the boundaries. You shouldn't be the one that pushes it even further, that takes it to another level. What you want is that if someone else crosses the line, that the staff can come to you and raise that issue with you. And once they do that, ask your staff member what it is that they would like. Sometimes it's just for their colleague to tone it down. Sometimes it's not to say anything directly, but for you to reiterate in a team meeting or through a communication or an email, just to kind of tone it down. But, there will be times when it's serious enough for formal action. And that's where you've got to ensure that you act with caution and with fairness. Try and see it from everyone's point of view and look to deal with it. In most cases, an informal chat is all what's needed because of obviously how things have been built up. So you don't always have to go down the formal route. Informal chats, getting both sides of the story usually does the trick. But again, you can look back and think of actually it could be avoided if you kind of identify early on where you think actually certain banter, certain things may potentially spiral out of control. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode, and I hope your workplace is one of laughter and good humour, but also you're able to recognise when things could get too far. Thank you for listening to another episode of Diary of a HR Man. Stories shared on Diary of a HR Man have been slightly altered to protect the identity of any business or individual. Please subscribe and follow my page on SoundCloud to keep up to date on further episodes. If you have any questions, please send me a message and I'll respond as soon as I can. Until next time, in a bit.